So we're really pleased to welcome Steve to Halton. The format of this evening's event really is intended to be an opportunity to ask Steve. He made a commitment in his manifesto to come out and talk regularly to people, both about the progress that he was making, but to hear, more importantly, about the issues that are affecting people in the Liverpool City region. So we've got an opportunity to hear from Steve now, and then we'll move on to the questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. I'm just going to explain a few things because Sally said Metro Mayor, Liverpool City region, and obviously that's because of devolution. So if I can just clarify those things, because not everybody fully appreciates or understands all of the nuances of what that actually means in practice. So there's a thing called the Liverpool City region, and obviously Halton is part of that, but it's more difficult, I would have thought, to try to explain that beforehand. You had something called Merseyside, the 5 districts there, and now with 6 districts coming together, so that's Halton, Knowsley, Liverpool, St Helens, Sefton and the Wirral, and that scale gives us 1.5 million people. Then there's this thing called the Metro Mayor. Halton has a mayor, and we have in total 11 different roles with the mayor associated with them. So just in Liverpool, for instance, they have a Lord Mayor, they have a City Mayor, they have a Metro Mayor, and then in some of the parishes, they have parish mayors. So all of this is a backdrop to why I believe there's still some confusion over what the Metro Mayor role is. And then because of Rob Polehill's here, who's the leader of Halton Council, but because of Rob and the other leaders at that time, they signed a devolution deal. And that devolution deal basically is to transfer powers away from Whitehall and Westminster so that we can make decisions for ourselves more locally here. Now, councils don't disappear, because some people are under the misapprehension that there's a Metro Mayor and then there aren't any powers from councils. It's about devolution from the top down rather than taking powers away from local authorities. So Halton very much is there, and it's about service delivery. The Metro Mayor and the Mayoral Combined Authority is about building a strategic direction and ensuring that we have the capacity to deliver the monies that are passed down with devolution. And those monies are, initially we get £30 million a year for 30 years. Unfortunately, it's not even index linked, so that means that it's been going for 2 years. Even this year, it's worth less than it was 2 years ago, and in 30 years' time, it will be worth considerably less than it was at the beginning of this. So we need to invest some of that to get a multiplier return, so that at least it keeps pace with inflation. But we want to do much, much more than that. So our strategy is that the devolved powers include things like economic growth, skills, transport, a whole host of different things. But over and above all of those devolved powers from Whitehall, we have the ability to develop projects for ourselves that really will be transformational. And one of the things that was made clear to me when I started to identify what the 6 districts all had to offer and what the synergies of those 6 districts might be, was that here in this part of the world, we have probably one of the least well-known, but certainly one of the best assets, a real jewel in the crown of the Liverpool City region, and it's Daresbury, and it's what happens there. There's something called the Hartree supercomputer, and if you don't know about it, genuinely Google this. It's something that everybody should feel rightly proud of, and that can compute what's called big data analytics. So it's really something for the future now. And that Hartree supercomputer beforehand just sat in Halton and was doing really good stuff. But we can connect that up with something else that we have, which is an asset called the Hibernia link. And again, really fortunately, in Sefton, in Southport, there's this link that connects the UK via Southport to North America via Nova Scotia and then on to mainland China. And those two things sit separately, and we've never before had a single entity, a political body that could get those two districts to work together to see what the advantages of those two things might be. But we have now, so working with the 6 district leaders, we're looking to connect these two things up and form a ring that goes through all 6 districts. And what that means is that we can do things that nowhere else in the country can do. We have a supercomputer and a link to America. And Obama spoke about the next American moonshot, they call it, the next big thing that's going to happen in America. And that's to try and find the cure for cancer. And to try and find the cure for cancer, you need to map the genome in the human body. And to do that, for those people who aren't technical like me, it takes a terabit of information. In other words, it's a great big piece of digital information for each individual person. And you can't move that around the system unless you have something like a supercomputer. So for us, we're looking at what the advantages and the opportunities of having these two assets connected would be, and we've started a piece of work. It's going to take 6 months. We've started this piece of work, and I spoke today about somebody who's investing in proton technology, which is, for anyone with cancer, you'd probably know, where you have radiotherapy and it destroys tissue. This proton therapy it just attacks the tumours. But again, that needs this digital capacity. So we've got something called the Knowledge Quarter. And the Knowledge Quarter is about now trying to get the cluster effect of trying to get these life science institutions to come and invest in our area so that we can do all these things. And then the other big one is that we've got, obviously, the River Mersey. And the River Mersey, for centuries, has been the lifeblood of the city region and of Manchester. But what we want to do with that is, in the devolution agreement, there's the ability to harness its power. And if we do that, which we can do, it means that we've got clean, green, renewable, but predictable energy, because you know that the tide's going to come in and the tide's going to go out, and we know we can predict what the energy output from that will be. But for ourselves, when you look at those two things in isolation, brilliant. But when you link them together, it really does provide us with the transformational opportunity that we've been crying out for. Because some of these global companies are looking to invest, but they need ultra-speed digital connectivity. And because they've signed up to be carbon neutral, they're looking for renewable energy. And I guess what we're able to do with our two assets, nobody else in the country is able to compete with us. Probably we're hoping that nobody in Europe and other places will be able to compete. It means that we can really attract some of the global companies to tie into and plug into the fourth industrial revolution stuff, the jobs of tomorrow. 65% of our kids in school now will be employed in jobs that haven't yet been created, which is a staggering statistic. So we know that they're going to be in different things than what currently exists. They will be in the fourth industrial revolution. I want to be part of that for the city that was the gateway to the first industrial revolution. I think we can become the city region to be the digital gateway to the fourth industrial revolution. Now, I know there's going to be loads and loads of questions, and I'm happy to take them. I certainly know, because people have emailed in, and I've had hundreds probably over the last 7 months on Mersey Gateway. We'll try and see what we can do on that and perhaps group them. We could probably take all night, but Rob is here. We'll stay behind. We'll speak to as many people as we possibly can. Just to, at the very beginning, outline that the Mersey Gateway, the new bridge, doesn't fall under the powers of the Metro Mayor, but I'm not abrogating responsibility. So we'll talk then about what the issues are and see whether between me and Rob we can answer those questions that are put forward. So, Sally, happy to answer any questions.
So thanks, Steve. So as you've said, we do have a considerable number of questions relating to either the tolls or something connected to that. not specifically the gateway, but predominantly the tolling of the crossing. So my suggestion is, I've read through all of the questions as of the team, and there are some very similar ones. So my suggestion is that we do group some of those. We're going to dedicate about 20 minutes to the questions on the gateway and the tolls, and we'll pull together some of the themes. So what I'm suggesting we do around that area for questioning is that I'll make reference to the person that's asked the question, and then mention that there are a number of other similar questions connected to that one, and the names of those people that have asked them. So I think if people are content with that, and then what we'll do, we'll give Steve an opportunity to answer some of those, and then I'll open it up for a short period of time to questions or any follow-up comments or questions that people might have. So if people are happy with that, I'm going to kick us off with a question from Kenny Harper. I don't know if Kenny's been able to join us this evening. Okay. So Kenny's question is to Steve. Steve, do you support the anti-tolls campaign to remove the tolls from all tolled roads? That's a mean feat in getting the word tolls in there. In the Liverpool City region, even if they are under your remit or not, surely you can have an opinion on it. And I'm just going to add to that by saying that Paul Burkett, Claire Poppy, Joe Nightingale and Laura Smith have asked very similar questions to that one. So let's see if we can get an answer on that topic.
Okay, the issue is that, and I've just spoken to Derek on the way here, Derek Twigg, who's the MP, one of the MPs for this area. Just by coincidence, he phoned from the Commons. It was about another issue, a sports-related issue, to tell you the truth. But just chatting to him and said, I'm going to this meeting and I'm certain there'll be questions about tolls, about Mersey Gateway, about what's happened. And as you know, Derek has led the campaign, the fight from day one to see whether this area could get a second crossing. As you know, there are other crossings, there are 2 tolls and the Silver Jubilee Bridge, but to get another crossing to alleviate the congestion on the Silver Jubilee. Along with Rob and others, they, from very, very early doors, wanted that to be toll-free and have put as much pressure as you possibly can on any government, in fact, governments of all persuasions, to try and see whether they could get the tolls omitted from the papers, from the orders, from the plans, to try and get the second crossing. And obviously, I knew there'd be questions, so I had a look back at Hansard, which is the record of what happens in Parliament, but also of some of the stuff from many years ago before there was an agreement. And basically, Rob and others are quoted in the media of saying about the need for this to be toll-free. And it came to a decision whereby the government basically said, well, look, you have to have a tolling regime or you don't get the bridge. And because of the plans that have taken many, many years to get to that stage, these things have a long, long gestation period, a long lead-in period to get to, and considerable sums of money have to be invested to try and even work up what's called a business case for these things. Then the government had the council over a barrel, and there was very little wriggle room other than to look at where Rob and others took the fight. And what they took the fight was to see whether local residents and local businesses would be able to get free tolling. And they were largely successful in that, certainly with local residents in the bands A to D. A to D are free. To F, sorry, to F. So those people who are council taxpayers who would have to go through a registration scheme, but they would have up to 300 journeys per year where those journeys would be free. And that was a huge concession to try and force the government into. And I know, because I've seen the leaflets, that in the last election, 2015, sorry, George Osborne, who was then the Chancellor of the Exchequer, started to promise people that if they voted Tory, then in other areas they would get free tolling as well. And we've always tried not to play politics on this one, but to put forward the case for why we think that tolling is an imposition, certainly on people who are at the lower end of the economic ladder. And I supported Derek, I was a Member of Parliament, as you heard. I supported Derek when he had his debate in Parliament, and many Merseyside MPs and people from much further afield came in to support that. But the reality is that it was either this or nothing at all. And I think for what the political leadership have done in Halton to get to where we are has been quite remarkable. Is it enough? No, it's not enough. And nobody who's a politician in Halton believes it's enough. And we will all continue to fight to see whether there are additional concessions that a government will make. I've got John McDonnell, who's hopefully the next Chancellor, coming to the City region next week. And we're going to be speaking to John about what a future Labour government might be able to offer. And Rob and myself will have discussions on it. But we are, well, I was going to say we're stuck with the government that we are. Well, who now knows how long that's going to last and when the next election might be. But in the immediacy, this government have said that the deal that they've had was about as far as they're going to go, and that they wouldn't extend the scheme further. So whilst I think quite rightly people in Halton feel aggrieved, there are people from St Helens and Knowsley who write to me in their droves because they're having to pay £4 a day every day to go to and from work. And tolling is always one of those things where it would be easy to say, and part of the question, no, I don't agree with tolls at all. And of course, none of us agree with tolls, but it's what's the alternative to pay for the schemes. And we've still got tolling on the two Mersey tunnels 40, 50 years after those things were opened. But those, the first one, after they said they'd be paid off, rather. So, but those revenues that we get from the tolls go to subsidise things like the most advantageous concessionary travel scheme in the whole country. So there are things that you can do with the monies that you get, and that's what we do in our city region. And again, I'm certain that there'll be questions about why Halton aren't getting it, but are there transport questions on?
There are
no?
some.
Oh, well,
I think so,
we'll wait for that one later.
Well, so let's just, I mean, some of these are very much continuing on a theme. Let's take a question from John Harrington. And John says, if John's here. So John, are you happy that I read your question?
Yeah,
so John says, given the fact that once the Silver Jubilee Bridge reopens, the Mersey will be the most tolled river in the country, what measures are available to remove the tolls to restore parity with the rest of the country, and do the tolls disadvantage the so-called Northern Powerhouse?
The latter one is a bit more difficult, isn't it? Because it's subjective, and we don't know yet, because the gateway's only been open 3 months, is it? Something like that. So we'd need a much longer period to model to see what the effects economically are on the Northern Powerhouse, and certainly on the city region. But in regard to tolls, the Mersey tunnels, and that's what I can speak about, and I'll come on to the Silver Jubilee in a second, but the Mersey tunnels are now, 80 odd years old and 50 odd, 60 years old, and need an awful lot of maintenance. So currently we're having to replace all of the electrics in it, and it's costing millions, sometimes some of these schemes tens of millions. They need to be continually pumped out. They are now the safest tunnels because, as you know, on the sides of them They've got those escape pods where people... So all of that takes considerable investment, and there isn't enough money from central government that would allow us to do that, even if we could spend some of that money on those things. So we have to raise money elsewhere, and we do that through a transport levy, and everybody in Merseyside pays into that transport levy. Halton's slightly different. They have money that comes in, but it's passported straight out for different services, so it's a different way of doing it. But everybody else pays a levy on their council tax bill. And those things help us to do some of the things that we are. So we're investing £460 million in brand new rolling stock. We're hoping to announce in the next few weeks the design for a new ferry. We are looking at the buses and the bus services that we currently have, and whether we can take those back under public management. So we're looking at re-regulation of the bus service. It's one of those things where if it worked, then Boris Johnson was the Mayor of London for 8 years, and if it worked in that time, he would have deregulated the bus service in London, but he didn't, because it would cause chaos. And I think that there's a better way of doing these things, so we're looking at that. That all takes a considerable resource just to look at those schemes. But on Silver Jubilee, as a combined authority, we've invested £6 million into the refurbishment of the Silver Jubilee Bridge, and that was to bring forward that scheme where people would be able to use it. So pedestrians, cyclists, it's going to be down to one lane either way. It will last hopefully another 50, 60 years, whatever it's going to be. And because it's quite iconic, isn't it, really, for this area, the Silver Jubilee Bridge. But it takes real investment for some of these schemes. If the Silver Jubilee wasn't told, let's just consider that for a second, surely those people who are most concerned about having to pay £2 to cross it, those people who perhaps haven't got that on a yearly basis, they would queue to cross the Silver Jubilee. And actually what you'd be doing is creating the congestion that the original gateway was planned to alleviate. So it's a difficult one. It's one I know that councillors and the council wrestled with for a long time, and it's been decided, because government had the final say, that this also had to be told. But whoever has identified, like yourself, that we are all of the crossings you have to pay for. So you have to pay for the ferry as well, the two tunnels, the two bridges, and who knows what might happen in the future as well. But it's something the government really need to make a decision on, and we'll be fighting in the meantime to ensure that if we can get concessions from this government and then try to influence the policy of the next government, that's what we're going to spend our time doing.
Okay. Does it relate very much to that? Okay. We're just going to wait for a microphone. We just wait for a microphone and then we'll...
Okay.
Thank you.
You said that we have to pay. Why? Nobody pays to cross the Thames. There are 18 free crossings across the Thames. Nobody pays for those.
Okay.
Why should we have to pay to cross our river?
Okay. Let's get an answer to that then. I think we probably have done, haven't we?
I'm not the government, and I'm not a representative of the government. You'd have to ask the government why they're insisting that here we have to pay for things. But hold on a second, you've asked the question, so if you can give me the courtesy of answering it. But in regard to what happens down south, I'm informed that any further projects to cross the river there would also be told. And why do I know that? Because I wrote, because of the concern of the volume of people who'd sent emails and letters to me, I wrote to the Transport Minister. So I have that, and I'm happy to distribute it to anybody here to share that information. But that's what I've been told, that any future crossings would be the same as what happened on the gateway.
Okay. So I'm going to take a question from Richard Bamber. Richard, are you happy that I ask it? Yeah, okay. So Richard asks, there's a theme here. So, but Richard asked a slightly different variation on that theme, which is that in the proposals for a marketing of the Mersey Gateway, it was widely publicised that tolls would be similar or there would be parity to the Mersey Tunnel tolls. Are you disappointed that the business community were misled?
Well, I can only comment on the latter part, whether they were misled, if I knew about the former part, and I don't know who said that and when it was said. All I know is that when I was in the debates in the House of Commons, then it was quite clear that Derek, because he'd been working closely with the council and councillors, was putting forward the argument that businesses should also have the same concession. Because this is not one of my, it doesn't fall within my purview. I don't know all the details, so I don't know whether Rob wants an answer now or we can stay behind later on and discuss it. I don't know the answer to that.
The effect that has is when
Let's have...
Yeah, sorry about that. Obviously, if you've got tolls that are quite a lot cheaper on the tunnel, and then you've got the gateway, which is quite a lot higher. For instance, if one of our coaches goes through on a tag on the Mersey Tunnel, I think it's £2.40. We go across the gateway, it's £7.20 on a tag. So there's a big difference. So when we talk about, you mentioned about congestion and possibly not charging on the Silver Jubilee Bridge and the congestion that will cause, when we've got, at the moment, we've seen the huge... the company that went Carillion, isn't it, that's gone down. Everyone's watching the pennies, so are you going to get hauliers and so on that end up rerouting to go through the tunnel to save a few bob?
Okay.
Well, it depends on where they're coming from, because diesel, which is nearly all of the engines that they have, that's fairly expensive at the moment, so it might be a false economy. But the only issue with if there's an argument for parity is that it cuts both ways, doesn't it? And this is a guaranteed price for a fixed period of time. The tolls can go up. At the moment, we have the ability to take them up just beyond £2, and we haven't done that at the moment because of quite rightly, the furore that would cause with people who believe that tunnel tolls are a tax on them. And that's, but we all agree that. We all agree. Nobody likes paying taxes. Nobody likes paying for tolls. But what's it for? So on ours, I can justify the money, the tax take that we have in the Mersey tunnels because of the schemes that we operate. And quite easily, I can say, if you're 60 years of age in Merseyside and part of the Mersey travel scheme, at 60, you get a free bus pass. And nationally, it's 60. I'll explain that. In Merseyside, I did say. So in Merseyside, not in the Liverpool City region, but in Merseyside, in the 5 districts, when you're 60, you get a concessionary travel scheme. And nationally, it's 67. So the differential between 60 and 67 is picked up by us. But that's a choice that we've made because we have the income from the tunnel fees, and we've now been able to invest in the brand new rolling stock, and we are looking to do stuff on the buses, and we've got a bus alliance, for instance, where other areas can only look envious at us because our bus fleet is one of the cleanest and greenest in the country, and we've got electric buses, and we've got all sorts of advantages through that. But you have to raise some money to be able to do some of those things. Where other areas like Greater Manchester and West Midlands have been ahead of us is that they've had the ability to raise pots of money to do things. Some of that is through central government, it has to be said. And I want to get to the stage where we also have the ability to raise money, but to invest that money so that we can get something tangible back. If we did the tidal barrier, and Rob has the portfolio for energy in the city region, but if we did that, there may well be tens of millions of pounds per year that comes back into our coffers. Now, there are things that we could do, and we might decide on Mersey Tunnel tolls to reduce them, or to change the tunnel toll rate. But we might say that we wanted to do other things with it. But that's our choice. We can make that choice more locally. And perhaps if I don't know whether you've got one on the transport, because I know these ladies are all saying, well, why are we not getting it when we're 60 and others have got it when...
Well, let's just... I've got sort of 3 more questions that relate really to the gateway. I've got a question from Kenneth Jackson and James O'Prey that is not... I'm not quite sure where it is, so I don't know if any of them want to ask it. It's Mersey-Gate, Bridge Toll, Spike Island. So I presume it's something specifically connected to Spike Island?
Well, yeah, in a way,
Let's just get you a microphone. It's just that side.
I don't want to sing here, like. No, the toll, I mean, everybody's got to pay the toll. Now, there's certain haulages firms that I know that don't pay a toll going over there, which is about £7.50, £8.50, which is Eddie Stobart, as far as I can gather. I might be wrong on what I'm saying. Now, the toll bridge itself, they pay a £10 levy a year, don't they? So why doesn't everybody pay the £10 levy? I mean everybody, from Penkworth, Warrington, wherever they come from.
Okay.
That can be done.
Let's get an answer to that then, because I
Okay.
think some of that needs just a bit of clarity.
I mean, that is a really good question, and it can be solved, because I know from Birmingham down to Scotland, the north has got to pay for everything down south, and it's wrong.
Okay.
Totally wrong.
Brilliant. Let's just get very quick.
The
Dave,
second
sorry.
part of it, the second part, I can give you an example. So today, this organisation called Transport for the North, TFN, but you'll hear about it. It's just been on Granada Report and the BBC. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
sorry.
well, we launched that campaign today, and one of the things, quite rightly, that myself and other politicians have said, for every pound that we get in the north, the south gets 6. So yes, they do get favouritism, and that's something that really needs to be addressed to rebalance the economy.
Before they go, when they
You need that mic, because
You're taking a liberty here with this, but go on, Will.
Elvis is on again. No, when they're going over to the bridge, there used to be a slipway going down to West Bank. Now it's blocked off. I believe they're going to open it up again. Now there's an island at the bottom there.
Okay.
Why don't they put a toll bridge, a pay toll there, so they can come down from, say, call it B&Q, round to the bottom, pay, go back up to Asda, come back and then go over the bridge. Now there was a couple of breakdowns, which I read in the paper.
Yeah,
it cost them £4,700.
I've got some.
And they can do the same on the Runcorn side.
Yeah.
Now they had a certain time to build that bridge, otherwise there was like a levy charge or something on it. So why didn't they put the toll part in the first place?
So your question is, can we have booths?
One on each side, Runcorn and Widnes.
Okay.
And there's
You find to do
plenty of room.
We did have booths when we first started, and we took them off, and it saved £30 million, and that was the cost to take them plazas off.
Let's just get an answer.
That was £30 million because of the plaza and the land it takes to it. Because you can't, if you have a booth, you have a queue, and you need to have a big space in order not to have the queue. That was the theory then. We say we get a free crossing, the residents. They don't get a free crossing. The council picked that up. So that cost us £8 million, that. So we can't offer it to now we've said to Warrington, if you want to do the same, and Knowles, if you want to do the same, so tell us you want to do the same, you have to pay what we're paying. We pay for 300 trips for everyone to go over. Anything over that, the deal is with the government is they pay the extra, they pick up the tab extra over the 300, because we shouldn't pay to cross a bridge in our own borough, and that's what the argument was, and that's what they come back with. But we were told early days, a toll bridge or no bridge. And you've seen the Silver Jubilee, and if you live near it, you know what's happened there. We thought that'd be about 8 months of work being done. It's 18 months at least, because it's really jiggered. So that would have been closed now. And we'd had to close it at some point because we was desperately to close it because it was becoming unsafe. And if the bridge hadn't been there, the Mersey Gateway, we'd all be going through Warrington now. And that, you know what I mean? That's where we are. And Eddie Stobart, everyone pays to go over that bridge, even Eddie Stobart. Everyone pays.
It is a rumour. So that, I think, thanks Rob, for just getting up and clarifying those few points. I feel like I need to make a clarification, which is, although I sound like this, I was very much born in St Helens. So any kind of conversations about the South, you can leave me out of that. I'm very much a northerner, even though I've spent a bit of time there. Okay, so we've got a slightly different question from Diane McCormick. Diane, are you happy that I asked that? Okay, so Merseyflow are charging district nurses as business users to travel across, and obviously there's a cost to the NHS. Steve, have you got an opinion on that?
I'll try and...
I phrase that as I'm the Halton Governor for Bridgewater Community Health Trust, and we have a lot of nurses that are having to cross the bridge, thanks Sally, to treat patients in their own home. And when I asked the question of Merseyflow, they told me that it is a directive from the council that they have to be charged as business users. Now, I don't consider district nurses to be business.
Thanks, Diane. Steve, have you got a quick answer for that one?
I'll try and not give you my personal opinion, because you might be able to see from my face that I think that district nurses do an unbelievable job, and when you have an elderly relative or a mother who needs a district nurse, believe me, you realise just what the value of those people are. I don't know the reasons why. It's one of those, happy to stay behind, and me and Rob will pick that up with you.
Okay.
I'd like to discuss that.
Thank you. Okay, so then there's two questions that are very similar from Claire Poppy. I'm taking a little bit out of Claire's because there's a number of questions, but I think we've had answers to most of them. And one from Joe White, that really relate to the charges regarding the recovery of vehicles and the kind of hard shoulder issues. But I'm just wondering whether that, again, is more of a detailed question for Rob, and whether or not that's something we could do after the session, because I am quite keen that we're probably a tiny bit over our 20 minutes, and I'd like to get the questions. We've got some really interesting questions about things that Steve does have some, not just an opinion on, but lots of influence over. Just very quickly, sir, let's get a microphone there. We've got 1 minute.
Hello, my name is Joe White, and the question I have isn't really related to the tolls or the recovery on the Merseyflow River at all. This question was posed to me by a lady that was a manager in Western Point, who on Christmas Day, coming home from Wrexham, coming off the motorway junction at 12, gets to the first set of traffic lights, has a problem with the car, just keeps it going. The lights change to green, she goes through, but she gets caught at the next set of lights, and then the car wouldn't go any further. A gentleman in the car behind gets out of the car and helps her to push it onto like a concrete standing that's there. Christmas Day, she's not going to get anyone to recover the vehicle on Christmas Day, so she knew it was safe there, it wasn't obstructing anything at all. Gets a lift home to Western Point, which is just up the road from there, and ends up the following day, Boxing Day. One of the friends was driving down and rang her up and says, "You do realise your car's not there any longer?"
Okay.
So she instantly rings the police, say, "My car broke down yesterday."
Joe, can you get us to the question then?
The question is,
Someone had told
there's
you,
no point of asking
presumably.
our council, because these questions just go round the block and come back again, because the council is party to these charges that were introduced to give it to one place. Now, the problem I've got is that they told the Huff Green Recovery Services, told the police that they had not picked the vehicle up.
Okay.
On the 12th of January, the police ring her back and said, "Yes, we found your car, Huff Green have it." She rings Huff Green up, says, "Yes, we've got it here, £150 recovery fee and £20 a day charges." The next thing is, they then wiped the charge just because they found out that Junction 12 doesn't come under their jurisdiction. But she will be charged as of tomorrow. You've turned the mic off, I can hear that, but I can carry on talking then.
Okay. Well,
no,
that
but
is
I
just
need
the
to get to the
question.
point, is there's no
Well,
point of
you
asking
do,
the council,
Okay.
what are we going to do about stopping these cowboys driving around,
Okay.
seeing a broken down car, picking it up and holding on to it till there's a nice little fat fee.
So the
council
question
have made
is,
a
what
gold
can we
mine
do
for these
about the
people.
charges? Okay. let's have a couple of seconds, Steve, if you've got anything to add to that. But I feel like that's quite a detailed question maybe that we need to pick up after, Joe, because I think, you know, it's very similar to what Claire's submitted, but it might be a level of detail maybe that's not for this audience, that relates specifically almost to it's almost like a sort of surgery issue, isn't it? I think if that's okay with you, Joe, we'll pick that up afterwards. Thank you.
I'd like it the mayor's thing, because I mean, I voted for you whenever
Okay.
see you. And Jeremy, you introduced Jeremy Corbyn.
Let's not spoil it for everybody else, because I've got a big handful of questions here.
I made a point of coming here.
Yeah, no.
You didn't come, and their questions was read.
Oh, no.
20-odd minutes.
No.
Joe, I'll stay behind for as long as you want, mate, at the end, and we'll have a discussion about this and no doubt an awful lot of other things, but I'll stay behind and talk to you about it. But I tried to explain at the beginning, it doesn't really fall under my responsibilities, but I didn't want to just go, I'm going to try and even answer any questions on these sort of things. It does sit with the council. Rob Polehill's here. Some of the councillors are here. Some of the local councillors are here. So they might even know the specific of the case. It might already be reported to them. Let's see if we can sort it out at the end.
Okay.
That's okay.
I'm going to move us on, and I know not everyone will be content with that because people will want to spend some time on it, but I think we started around about 7:10 and we've already done longer than I'd anticipated on the toll. So I'm going to move us on to some of the other questions that people have taken the time to submit, and everybody that's had a question read out is here this evening. So I've got a question from Mr. P. Bostock. I think he's happy that I read the question out, aren't you, sir? I understand a directly elected Metro Mayor is responsible for the strategic development of the whole city region. And a directly elected mayor or council leader is the head of a single city council or local authority. Can Metro Mayor Rotherham tell us what is the strategic development for the Halton area of the region, and where will the funding come from?
I was trying to tease this out right at the very beginning about where the funding comes from. So we get £30 million, but also because we've invested some of that in capacity, we've been able to draw down lots of different pots already. So we've probably had about £750 million that's gone on different schemes. And Halton have benefited, I think, particularly well from some of the schemes that they've bid in for. So I mentioned the Silver Jubilee Bridge, which was in rack and ruin and needed investment. The council couldn't have afforded to spend £6 million on that. So the council put a bid into something called the SIF fund, and the SIF fund was able to finance part of that. But believe me, that's only a drop in the ocean to the overall costs of some of these things. There's nearly £18 million that's gone into the Halton Curve, and the Halton Curve is something that people have been campaigning for, including, it has to be said, Derek Twigg again in Parliament, because quite rightly he's pointing out that if this had been down south, this would have been a priority for the government to have done it. But what does that do? It opens up the possibilities of travel to work, to Cheshire, to North Wales, and even beyond, obviously, with this Halton Curve, £18 million worth of investment. And there's a total pot in the last 18 months of £40 million that's gone to major projects, including, it has to be said, some of the money that's gone into apprenticeships. And for me, this is really where the whole thing starts to fit together. One of the things I believe that we need to do is to raise our aspiration as a city region, to look at where the opportunities lie to really make those big transformational changes. And on apprenticeships, I said at the beginning, I started as a brickie, but I started as an apprentice. And I genuinely believe in the value of apprenticeships, proper apprenticeships, like the ones that we all used to know, not stacking shelves for 16 weeks in all honesty. You know, I'm not decrying anybody who's done that as a qualification, but it's not really an apprenticeships, and we need to stop devaluing apprenticeships and really get back to the stage where mums and dads appreciate them, young people appreciate them, but also businesses want these. So I want to do a number of things. I want to introduce gold standard apprenticeships because I believe that MVQ level 3 should be a prerequisite. And then I want to roll out degree level apprenticeships. And these will be, you know, for your kids or grandkids or for family, for the future. And degree level apprenticeships give you massive advantages. My daughter chose to go to university. She was academically bright and she did. My lad didn't, he wanted an apprenticeship route. My daughter's come out with £40,000 worth of student debt. My lad is being paid for the job that he's been doing while he's been learning on the job. And degree level apprenticeships will mean that people don't, from working class families especially, they don't have to accrue this huge amount of debt. There's an alternative for them. So that you could do a degree level apprenticeship. It gets you to the same academic level, but you're working within a company, and hopefully when you've completed that course, because you've learned in that company, you're used to the company ethos, and you'd be more likely, I think, to get the full-time job at the end of that period. So I want to roll them out right the way across the city region. Some areas have already got some of these, only small numbers, but I want to roll them out. And this is where I've tried to use the influence of the Metro Mayor and the 6 district leaders working together to pressurise the government, because there's a pot of money called the Apprenticeship Levy Fund, and it's already been raised. Companies who have a £3 million turnover or more have to pay money into a pot, and we've calculated that there's an absolutely massive residual underspend of this pot. So we said to government, we've got a devolution agreement, use us as a pilot scheme, give us some flexibilities on this. We'll develop a programme whereby the skill shortages that you continually bang on about, we've got these skill shortages, we'll design programmes to address the skill shortages. Our young people get the jobs and the apprenticeships. Your businesses, if you like, get the people that they want. The whole country benefits, and we've said to the government, if you want, you can take credit for these. We're not precious about this. You claim if you want. And Justin Greening, through several letters, steadfastly refused to even discuss this. And the reason why they've refused to discuss it is because, and don't forget, this is getting streamed, so this is out there in the public. We're being fed back that the government are saving this up into almost like a savings account, so that should there be a snap election, they have a pot of money of hundreds of millions of pounds that they can give to some of their friends as sweeties, so that they will re-elect them once again. Well, I'm sorry, that's not good enough for areas like ours. We really need that investment and that opportunity to start giving our young people the skills that they need to get the jobs of the future. If we're going to do our part in trying to create the economic growth, surely the government can play ball with us and give us the flexibility so that we can train people up for those jobs. But they won't at the moment. By the way, Justin Greening is no longer the Secretary of State for Education.
Okay. Have you just got a little follow-up for that?
Did you say there was £700 million being invested here? And was that just the bridge, or was the other?
No, sorry, that wasn't just in Halton. That's in the Liverpool City region.
Yeah. So, to go back to the question...
Rob wants it, though.
To actually go back to the question, where is the investment in the... sort of here? I understand sort of Daresbury.
Yeah.
That's just, the technology and everything else. Yeah. But where is the investment? Because... let's talk about the bridge, because the bridge has been talked about a lot. How many of those apprentices were actually on that bridge, getting sort of jobs out of it? And where are they now? Is there anybody, is anybody sort of taking stock about those apprentices, okay, if there were them?
Okay.
And the next time you see John McDonnell, the best thing to say to him if there is a Labour government, scrap the tolls. That's the first thing you've got to set in, because because Steve, every time you come here, all you're going to get is hammered over the bridge.
Okay.
I know and I accept that. I'll give you an example if we get off the bridge just for a second about where this investment has directly benefited you here, rather than, Kirby or St Helens. Alston were looking at a site to invest in, and again through Rob's leadership, we were able to put together this SIF application, single investment fund, but Alston got £5 million and have set up well, you've probably seen it, a great big shed, I'd call it. It's a huge big thing. And what they're doing is the Virgin Pendolino trains, them great big 11 carriage trains, they're refurbishing them, and they've taken people from the local area, and it's 75, it could be 78, but I'll go at the lower, 75% of local people who've benefited from those jobs. And not only that, they've taken real apprentices on, and we went to see the apprentices, and they're doing all sorts of different types of occupational areas. But that's only the start. We needed to build this big shed, and they're doing this, and they're respraying them as well, all these trains. But it means that if they were successful, because they've bid for the new rolling stock for HS2, if they were successful, then they'd build them here. So it is something for the future. There are real jobs now, real apprenticeships now. They're paying money through to the council because of business rates and blah, blah. People are able to use some of their disposable income in the local economy. It's a huge success story.
Okay.
You very, very rarely hear of these, because I guess what? It's a positive story.
Okay.
All you hear is negativity. And I think this is something that we should be really shouting.
I'm going.
No.
Yeah. So I'm going to move us on. You've touched on this quite a lot, Steve, already. But Neil Pye asked a question which is a little bit of an extension of this. So I'm going to ask it if that's okay. So it's, what progress have you made in solving the problems of adult education, skills and training across the city region? I think you've said a little bit about that. So it's just anything additional you want to say. Okay.
This is the bane of my life. This whole saga. When the devolution agreement was signed, as part of it, adult education budgets was writ large. It was there in the main body of the devolution agreement, and the government have reneged on this deal. And there are people who said that they may not have entered into this partnership arrangement with 6 districts to sign a devolution agreement if that hadn't have been part of the deal. So again, for me, it's sleight of hand. Don't forget again, this is this will end up some officials will be watching this, and I can tell you that we feel very let down. But the thing is, it's not just our area. There are 6 areas in the country that have devolution agreements. So it's us, the West Midlands, Greater Manchester. There's Tees Valley, Peterborough and Cambridgeshire, and West of England. And there are 4 Labour and 2 Tories. So you would expect myself and in Greater Manchester, it's Andy Burnham, you'd expect us to kick off, wouldn't you? Well, no. All 6 of us have signed a letter to the government to say that we feel let down. So even the Tories feel let down on this. And we are getting that devolution deal this year. There's a transitional year, but we are getting that funding. And then we can start to invest how we believe that money should be spent, and not by Whitehall mandarins, if you're watching in Whitehall.
Okay, so I'm conscious that we've got 15 minutes, so I'm gonna try and speed up, and we'll probably get shorter answers if that's okay, Steve. Because, importantly, let's not skirt across things. We've talked about transport a little bit, and you've touched on it, but we've got a question from Ian McIntyre, and Ian asked, given the transport announcement that you've touched on that was earlier today, what will this do for Halton residents?
It could be really massive for us. One of the things that we're trying to get is connectivity, both within the city region, but between ourselves and Manchester Airport and Manchester City Centre, and then onwards to Leeds and Sheffield and all that. So the Northern Corridor, which is 16 million people, There are 19 leaders in that who have all agreed that we need a single voice, because for transport and other infrastructure projects, the south is massively favoured over the north, and I can give you this thing called the BCR. I can explain all the formula behind that, but we need to change that, and we need to get a fairer share, and that's how we're going to do this. The government might be able to ignore Halton, they might even be able to ignore the city region with 1.5 million people. It's much more difficult when you're trying to ignore 16 million people, and that's what we represent across the Northern Corridor.
Okay, thanks, Steve. So I've got a question from Josh Christian, and Josh is going to ask that, I think. So Josh, do you want to use my mic?
Hi Steve, I'm involved with running a grassroots junior football team within Halton, and there's hardly any funding available. We do get little bits of the council, but a large part of it we have to fundraise ourselves for insurances, pitch fees and so on, so forth. So what is the plan on funding for young people and sports to keep us off the streets and healthy in the local area?
Thanks.
It is one, again, that we can pick up at the end, because it doesn't fall under my remit. But let me tell you, the amount of people who have done voluntary work where beforehand there were opportunities for them to raise some funding, who are really struggling now, is an indictment really of the way this country currently is. And for me, that is a direct result of the current government that we have. Others might differ from that, but believe me, you've got people who are charities who are doing really valuable work that are struggling at the moment. My mum had Alzheimer's, and it's a devastating illness. And in the Liverpool City region, we had one of the head officers for Alzheimer's, and we were all doing that dementia-friendly training and all of that sort of stuff. They've had to pull out because of the difficulties and the demands on their services, and they pulled out of our area and have ended up down south. And you think, well, it's not cheaper to run things down south, is it? But it's because they can raise funding more easily down south, where they've got a buoyant economy, than they can in our areas. But for me, Alzheimer's and dementia and things like that are not things that we should be relying on charity to ensure that our loved ones get the service that they need. This is something that the government really needs to take seriously. And I think mental health issues, including people getting older and getting conditions, are things that we're trying to get right at the top of the political agenda. And whether you like him or not, believe me, the person who's spearheading this is Jeremy Corbyn. He's done an absolutely first-rate job in raising this at every stage. And I know that because I used to be his PPS, and I used to write some of his questions at PMQs, and we were always banging on to say that the government really needed to take this seriously. So, I understand difficulties that you're having. Everybody is. It's really cold comfort. Let's see whether there are things that we might be able to help you with at the end to do something to raise some funding.
Okay, thanks, Steve. So we've got a question from Professor David Norman, and I think he'd like to ask the question, so we'll get a microphone.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for coming to talk to us and to listen to us, Mr. Mayor. I want to change the subject completely. You've already mentioned this evening a couple of times that one of your major priorities will be to revive plans for a tidal barrage across the Mersey estuary. Two previous projects, you'll know, have been put forward for that and examined in the last 30 years, both of which were abandoned on economic and environmental grounds. And I'd be interested to know how you propose to overcome those two hurdles.
More on the economic grounds, to tell you the truth. Things like, for instance, Barebow Bank, which is the largest now in the whole of Europe offshore wind farm, they had the same sort of difficulties, environmental considerations, but also about making the business case stack up. They did that, and now the tariff that they're getting means that they can't put enough of these things up. As you know, 8 and 10 megawatt structures, huge, great big things the size of the Radio City Tower in Liverpool, huge, great big things with turbines on there. Ours we haven't decided on the shape of the scheme that we want to introduce. So, as you know, there's a barrier, there's a possible bridge, there's a lagoon, there's all sorts of things that we can do. But one thing that I do know is that we need to do something, because the alternative, and areas like this and a number of others in the Liverpool City region, so in out of 6 districts, a number of them, there's geological studies to see whether we can smash the ground up and extract gas through fracking. And despite the fact that, of course, there will be environmental and ecological considerations for any tidal scheme that we put forward, I think we can overcome those. It's the other things that I think will be more difficult. Can we prove, because we haven't got £3 billion, by the way, but we would need to enter into a joint partnership. Can we make the business case stack up? Can we prove that it would be financially viable for somebody to invest in that scheme? Now, I'm not the expert, and one of the first lessons that I learned is that when I was in a football team, but one of the first things is, if you're not really good at something, get somebody alongside you who can do the bits that you can't do. So we've got somebody called Brent Cheshire, who again you're probably aware of, and Brent Cheshire is the person who's responsible for delivering Barebow Bank from day one, turning it into a non-starter, into now where something that's the envy of the whole of the rest of the country and Europe. People come here to visit to see how he's done that. He's heading up the Tidal Commission, and we're not making any rash choices. As I say, Rob's the person who's got the portfolio responsibility for this. We're not going to rush into something. But the stuff that happened on the Mersey Gateway Bridge, believe it or not, is beneficial to us, because they had to drive piles into the seabed, into the riverbed. All of those studies and all of that data is helpful to us. And technology has improved so much between what the turbines could do just 7 years ago, which is the Peel report in 2011. Between then and now, it makes it, we believe, viable for this scheme to go forward. But the proof of the pudding will be in eating. The government have said they're going to support us, so we're going to ask them for their support. But in my office, if I did nothing else, I could meet somebody every single day of the week who wants to offer me huge sums of money to be a partner in this scheme. We don't want to give it away. We want that to remain as part of our legacy, so that we get a revenue return and a revenue stream, so we can invest that money into schemes in our 6 districts. But I'm again happy to talk to you, not just on this, but if you've got some understanding and expertise in this area, please come along and help us to make certain that we get things right.
Okay, thank you. Good question. So we have got a number of other questions, a few of them. I've got 2 questions from Grace Bamber, and I've got 3 questions, I think, from Lorna Plumpton. So I was trying to narrow down. So Lorna's are really about buses, transport, the impact in Halton. So you're happy that I try and pull those together as a group? So Lorna asked a couple of things, Steve, about Halton's not included in the bus alliance agreement. Why is that? What are the opportunities for Halton residents? Why, is there a disadvantage? And it's such an important issue for Halton residents. And there's a sort of an extension of that, which is, as Halton is part of the combined authority, and Lorna understands that a fee is paid for all residents living in the borough, will this entitle people living here in Halton to the same entitlement of travel when travelling around Merseyside? So you've touched on that a little bit, but I suppose it's a fairly quick answer about, is that possible?
I don't think it deserves a quick answer.
Sorry.
It's a complicated thing, because the 5 districts which form Merseyside within a scheme with Mersey Travel, and that those monies that they raise through the levy have been used to subsidise this concessionary travel scheme. and Halton, only just coming into the Liverpool City region, hasn't got the same scheme or doesn't levy to the same level to its residents. So I think we've got a meeting this week. We've got a meeting this week to see how we start that journey to try and get the same scheme or aspects of the same scheme to Halton residents. But if you all wanted to get free bus passes now, believe me, the exponential rise in your council tax bills might be something that you start to balk at and think, hang on a second. So we have to try and find, I think, a transitional process before we can equalise these things. But ours is, it's fantastic. But even we're starting to look at, and this is Mersey Travel, this is part of what the Combined Authority is, we're starting to look at whether we have to raise additional funding so that we can continue at the rate that we are, and that might be through when people apply for it, there might be a charge against it or whatever, because outside of London, ours are the most generous in the whole country. But of course, if we could do it, it'd be great. Not just because of that, I think that people would start to feel more part of the city region if they had the same sort of rights and the same, as they see it, and the same pass as the rest of us. And even the buses and all that we're looking at, there's a whole host of things. But look, Greater Manchester have been doing this for 30 years. We've been doing it for 30 months. So people are going to have to be a little bit patient with us. There isn't a magic money tree unless you happen to be in the DUP. But we will be looking at every which way that we can to start to share those benefits.
Grace, I want to ask a question. Would you like me to ask one or two and maybe pick the alternative up with Steve after? Should we do number 2? So, Steve, Grace asked, do you agree with Jeremy Corbyn on nuclear disarmament and a reduced defence budget?
It's one of those issues that doesn't fall within my remit now.
Thank God, he says.
It's a debate that we had. You can imagine behind closed doors, me and him, sometimes when there was a bit of a bunker going on. But I'm a multilateral supporter. I have always believed that you do that by negotiating, trying to get as many people around the table as you possibly can, and then trying to see whether you can squeeze some concessions out of them. I don't believe in nuclear proliferation. I think the real dangers of what North Korea and their potential nuclear arms mean, that it's not the right time. If they're saying they can reach America, and we don't know whether this is all true or whether it's bravado, but if they can, then I think that's a real game changer in all of this. Would we like to see a nuclear-free world? Absolutely, and we need to work towards that end. Jeremy's held his views for nearly 40 years. And I think probably longer than that, actually. I think it's longer than that he got involved as a young man. But I've never been in CND, and I just think that there is an alternative way to do it. But whichever side you're on in that debate, I think we're all agreeing to the same ends. It's how you try to get there, and I just think that's probably an alternative at the moment to get people around the table to see whether we can make it a safer world.
Thanks, Steve. So we've got a very, I think it's probably a quick question because I think it's probably something we might need to pick up afterwards. But Daisy Slavin, am I saying that right, Daisy, asks, what might there be in terms of options for teenagers 14 plus? Because I think Daisy's view is that there's not much for young people to do after school. What might your view be on that, Steve?
I don't know the specifics of what happens here, but I used to be a councillor before I was an MP. I was a councillor, and in my area, we used to get devolved budgets before this government came in. And with those devolved budgets, we tried to look at diversionary activities try and get kids doing something. And my mum always used to say that, you know, the devil makes work for idle hands and all that sort of stuff. And I think there's some truth in that. I don't believe, by the way, that everything that kids do is antisocial. We used to kick balls around in the street, and now if people do that and there's more than two of them, it's a gang. And I don't believe all that. I don't subscribe to all kids are bad. Most of our kids are brilliant. Fortunately, we have too many people that I would like to try to talk to on a one-to-one basis. But we certainly need to be looking to see whether we can be a little bit more innovative with the way that we fund some of these activities. But it all comes down to one thing for me, and that is austerity means that the council have had nearly half of their budget cut, and they can't do the things that they used to do. And it's like anybody here, if you had half of your wage coming into the house or household income cut, you couldn't do some of the things that you used to do, and you'd have to find ways in which to survive. And councils are doing that, hopefully until there is a change of government. And we want that government to provide us with opportunities, not just open the purse strings and allow councils unfettered access to fantasy money. That's not what we're asking for, but to allow us the opportunities so that we can bid in for money where we can prove that there's an economic benefit from the investment. So if you stop kids from getting involved in some activities, there is a financial benefit from that. I think we should do it for moral reasons and ethical reasons and all of that. But if that's what the government wants us to do, we can do that, and they should work with us so that we don't end up with kids you know, in prison cells or going through a judicial system. It costs about £1,700 a week to keep somebody in a prison. Why don't they invest at the front to stop people from getting involved in these sorts of stuff, these sorts of things? And I think there'll be a massive saving to the whole country. There's a better way to do things, and this government aren't offering anybody the alternative.
Okay, so we've got a signal from the back that we've got 5 minutes left, and I think by luck rather than judgment, I've got a very short number of questions left. So Chris Biggs and David Hughes, I think, who've joined us this evening, have asked very similar questions. So Chris asked about the progress being made with developing and introducing a new independent careers service for young people. So let's just park that. And then David says he's a governor at a high school and is involved in work in creating programs to help bridge the gap between education and employment. And he wants to know about the current skills gap and your view on where we'll be in 5 years' time. So I think those two things are connected, and you have touched a bit on that, Steve, already.
The first part of it, when it was the coalition government, when it came in, it scrapped something called the connection service, and anybody who had young kids will remember. And they used to give impartial, independent careers advice and guidance. What the government did is pass on that responsibility to what I believe is individual organisations with a vested interest to try and persuade your child to either stay on at their school or to go to their college, and that's not what we should be doing. We should be finding whatever the best alternative for each individual child is. That's where we should be directing them. And for some people, as I said before, that could be academia. For others, it might be vocational and technical training. We need to stop kids starting on something and ending up as they're perceived as being failures. They're not. It's a system that fails them. So what do I want to do and where do I want to be in 5 years' time? We are looking at two things. One, we want to introduce independence into that, and we're working with, again, the government to try and see whether we can get some additional powers, but we're going to do that anyway. We're working with a number of organisations. But the skills gap thing, that's really a massive opportunity for us as well. I know it's a strange way of looking at things, because in 5 years' time, I believe we will have a different government. I believe that we will have the flexibilities to do something. I believe that in the interim period, we will be developing programmes that mean that we can start to address some of the skill shortage areas that we have. For instance, as a former bricklayer, perhaps I would say this, there's a massive shortage of bricklayers. So why are we training people in colleges when there's no opportunity for them to really get a job at the end of it? Yes, it's desirable for anybody to do anything at all because that's about lifelong learning. But if we've only got a limited pot at the moment, let's try and train people when we know that we can forecast the skill shortages so they can fill them first and give them the skills so that those jobs, when they come on stream, they're best placed for them. But if not, do what I think many people have done who are my age. You had to go and live away and work away whilst the economy recovered in our area, and I went to work all over the place to try and put bread on the table. And actually, it's quite good. It's very it's character building. Yeah, it's character building doing all that. And so that's where we will be in 5 years is to start in 2 years' time to train people up so that they're coming out after 3 years into those jobs that we need in the future.
And a really interesting statistic that you mentioned before about the children leaving school now and the jobs that they'll be doing, or you know, as they come up, the jobs they'll be doing don't exist yet.
No.
So I think that's a really interesting point, isn't it, about how people get the skills to meet those.
Well, we're doing two things just very quickly. We've got a skills strategy that we're going through, and also there's a skills commission on what are these about. I'm not somebody who just loves strategy so that they sit on the shelf, but from the strategy you can develop a delivery plan. That's what we're doing on that one. The skills commission is to go and ask businesses. I keep on going round and businesses say we can't get people with the right skills. So we've said to them, what do you mean? What are the right skills? Because I think it's an easy thing to say. We can't get people with the right skills. What are the skills that you can't get? And then we'll put programs together to ensure that people have the right skills so our local people can get the jobs in these areas.
Okay, and our final question, Steve, for the evening is from Angela Teeling. So you've talked a bit about this already this evening, where you've had some successes. Angela, do you want to ask your question? No, is that okay? Yeah. So Angela asks, and so you've talked about some of this already, but what have you been able to do since you were elected? So maybe give us a couple of highlights that you think. And Angela asked, interestingly, what barriers have and do you face? So I think we're going to close the evening on that one.
Okay. Because of the nature of the job, it's about developing the strategy so that we can go to government and get some of those pots of money that other areas have been getting for many years. And we're massively ahead. So there's an economic strategy. We have to develop, the government forces us to do some of this, so we have to develop a local industrial strategy. There's a national one, so we have to do a local one, and we're well on with that. We've had the skills stuff that I've described, but on transport, some of the things that we're going to do to try and get a better and more integrated transport system across the 6 districts, I think is really exciting for us. On housing, we've been able to start the process by which we can guarantee that 25,000 new homes will be built. But for me, the highlight is when you walk around the streets, and I've done it in the town centres here, but more pronounced in both Liverpool town centres, but also I've been to Manchester quite a bit and London. Homelessness and rough sleeping, and we were very fortunate in our city region. Crisis, the EU and DCLG, the Department for Communities and Local Government, they'd already commissioned a report, and as I came into post, that report basically fell on my table, and it's called a housing first approach. And so we were able to go to government to say, if you want us to do this, then we need some additional resource. And it's not a begging bowl, it's to ensure that nobody sleeps rough and homelessness is eradicated in the next 4 years. It's a massively ambitious target, but wouldn't it be great to be able to walk around without seeing people freezing to death on streets, you know, out in these sort of weather conditions, the human tragedies that you hear of what's happened, but also to provide good homes and a wraparound service so that people don't end up going somewhere and back on the street and going through this staircase where they have to jump through hoops and failing and going back on the streets. I think that's the measure of a civilised society, and we're going to be one of the first areas in the country to achieve that, and I'm rightly proud.
Absolutely. Okay, thanks, Steve. Just anything, a barrier? Anything that you find in...
Yeah, the main barrier is that we've never worked together like this, so it's new to us all. There's a period where we have to develop relationships and trust. We are trying to see whether there's commonality between some of the things that we do. For instance, business support. Everybody has sort of their own business support organ of councils, and you have chambers of commerce, and then there's something called downtown and business, and then there are a whole host of different things. We're going to develop one front door so that if somebody wants to invest in the Liverpool City region, that they go through this one front door, and then underneath it all the work will take place. But I'm old enough again, and I'm not looking at anyone in particular, but people of around my age might remember there used to be an advert on Granada Telly after Coronation Street, which I watched avidly with my mum. But after Coronation Street, there was an advert, and it was, if you wanted to invest in Warrington, Runcorn, then you phoned Eileen Bilton. And I want us to have an Eileen Bilton. I want us to have somebody that, if you want to invest in our area, there's one person to go to, and then we'll do the work all under that. But it doesn't matter about us doing the work. You know where to go to. And we need to increase in with investment and foreign direct investment as well. And I know that, again, just to finish off, there will be people here who feel they didn't have a choice about this Liverpool City region and don't like the Liverpool bit in the city region. There will be, and I know I've spoken to people who don't want to be associated with it. But you know, when you go abroad, when you go on holiday, and you say to people, where are you from? And you say, well, I'm from Widnes. And you go, where's that by? I bet you say, I'm Liverpool, because you know that everybody will know it. We've got the best attack brand that we could ever dream of. Ours is better known than Manchester's internationally and globally. Liverpool's better known. So we, by far, yeah. But we've failed to exploit that, haven't we? Because we've relied on too narrow a thing, you know, our culture, our history, our music, our football. All of those 6 districts now working together will benefit, because when somebody's coming in here now, we're going to develop those relationships. And when they're looking for somewhere to invest, what we'll do is ensure that we don't fight between the 6 of us, and the offer we provide to them is the right place. That's where they need to invest. And if that is in Halton, in Widnes or Runcorn, great. If it's in Kirby, great, because we'll make it easier for people to travel to those job opportunities. So it's pulling the whole thing together. I've said a lot about my mum, but I love the bones of my mum. But she used to sit there and knit, and I think I'm a bit of a knitter, because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to knit all the little bits all together so that the synergies make it better than the individual total sum of its parts. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Okay, so because of the late start, we're a little bit later than the planned finish time, but I think it's really important that as people have taken the time to submit questions and come along, that we try and hear from as many people as we possibly can. So I just want to thank Steve really for coming to Halton. We really appreciate your time. I know Steve's made an offer of staying behind. I think Grace should definitely ask her first question. It's a really good one. So make time to ask that one. And then anybody else, if there's anything that we wanted to pick up I think if we do that afterwards. So thanks to all of you for coming out, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.